When night falls, the darkness starts to speak. Between each breath and the silence, there are whispers no one was meant to hear. This is Night Whispers, where the dark has a story to tell. It started like any other quiet Friday night. I was 15, old enough to enjoy being home alone, but still young enough to get bored easily. The air outside carried that first chill of autumn, and the house felt bigger, emptier than usual. When my parents said they'd be home late, I called my best friend and neighbor Chris to come over and hang out. Chris was the same age as me, living just across the street, and we hung out almost every weekend. Normally, we'd play video games or watch scary movies in the basement, but that night nothing seemed fun. After a while, he smirked and said, "Want to play hide and seek?" I laughed at first, it sounded childish, but then I remembered how much fun it had been last time with our friends. My house wasn't big, but in the dark it felt like a maze full of perfect hiding spots. We switched off almost every light until the whole place was soaked in shadow, leaving only the kitchen lamp glowing faintly down the hall. It gave the house a strange, eerie vibe. The rules were simple: no going outside, no attic or crawl space. Everything else was fair game. Chris insisted on hiding first, so I stood in the living room, covered my eyes, and began counting slowly, loudly, to 50. I heard his hurried footsteps echo through the house, then silence. When I finished, I called out, "Ready or not, here I come," and started my search in the kitchen. It was empty, no good hiding spots. I peeked behind the basement door, then crept down the hallway. The bathroom was empty, and the front closet held nothing but coats. I sighed and headed upstairs, the wooden steps creaking under each careful step. Every tiny sound made my pulse quicken. In my parents' room, I checked under the bed and behind the dresser, no Chris. Down the hall, I entered my own room. Clothes scattered everywhere, but not enough cover for someone to actually hide. I still checked my closet and under the desk, nothing. That only left the guest room at the end of the hall. Its door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open, half expecting Chris to leap out yelling, "Gotcha," but the room stayed dark and silent. My heart thudded as I stepped inside, scanning the corners. I knelt to peek under the bed, empty. Opened the closet, also empty. By then I figured Chris must have been hiding in the basement, so I went back down. The air was cooler, the lights dim. I peeked behind the laundry machines, then into the cramped space under the stairs. Just as I was about to give up, I spotted him curled behind a stack of boxes, grinning. He burst out laughing, asking how long it took me. "Way too long," I said, laughing back. I held my breath as the footsteps grew louder, stopping right outside the guest room. The floorboards creaked softly, then I saw the faint shadow of his feet through the fabric of the bedskirt. He lingered there unmoving, and I could hear his slow breathing. My chest ached from holding still. Then, after what felt like forever, the steps turned away and faded down the hall. I waited frozen, not sure if it was safe yet. The silence started to feel wrong, heavy, unnatural. I slowly lifted the bed skirt just enough to peek out, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. My pulse thudded in my ears as I crawled out, half expecting him to jump from behind the door. Still nothing. The whole house felt still, like it was holding its breath with me. I finally whispered his name, but there was no answer. My heart skipped. That didn't make any sense. If he was still looking for me, then who had been in the guest room? I stared down the dark stairwell, the air suddenly feeling colder. "Chris, stop joking," I called, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked. Silence. Then faintly I heard movement below, slow, uneven steps, like someone shifting boxes. I backed away from the door, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. A chill ran down my spine when he said that. I tried to laugh it off, but my mouth was dry. "You probably imagined it," I said, but even as the words left my lips, I knew he hadn't. The way he looked pale, uncertain, told me he was serious. For a few seconds we just stared at each other, neither of us knowing what to say. Then, somewhere upstairs, a faint creak echoed through the ceiling. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just the house settling, or maybe the wind, but deep down I didn't believe it. The air felt heavier than usual, like the walls were holding their breath. Even Chris seemed quieter, glancing toward the ceiling every now and then. We joked to break the tension, but it didn't help. That uneasy feeling stayed crawling up my spine each time the floorboards creaked above us. We stared at the ceiling, neither of us daring to breathe. The sound had come from directly above us, my parents' bedroom. "Maybe something fell," Chris whispered, though his voice shook. I wanted to believe him, but the house was still too deliberate in its silence. I muted the TV, and for a few seconds all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. The steps were slow, deliberate, too heavy to be the house settling. Each creak echoed through the ceiling like a heartbeat. Chris's eyes widened, and I could see my own fear mirrored in his. "Someone's up there," I whispered, my throat dry. He didn't answer, just shook his head slightly. Then another step closer this time, and the light fixture above us trembled faintly. Each step felt like a warning. The faint glow from the kitchen barely reached the top of the staircase, leaving everything ahead swallowed in darkness. My grip tightened on the poker until my knuckles ached. Behind me, Chris's breathing was uneven, quick. Halfway up, I paused, listening. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a soft dragging sound like fabric sliding across carpet came from down the hall. The air felt heavier the closer I got to the door, like the house itself was holding its breath. My heart thudded so hard I was afraid whoever was inside could hear it. The dragging stopped, replaced by faint, breathing low, ragged, and close. Chris tugged on my sleeve, whispering urgently, "Let's go, man." But I couldn't. Something in me needed to see what was behind that door. I swallowed hard, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. The air inside the room was cold still. My flashlight beam trembled as I aimed it at the half-open closet. For a split second, I thought I saw a movement, a shadow slipping between the coats. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Chris didn't answer. He was already backing away, eyes wide with terror. The laughter died instantly. My grip on the poker tightened as the echo of the door closing faded through the house. Chris's face went pale. We both knew my parents weren't home yet. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Then faintly came the creak of footsteps on the floor below, slow and deliberate. Whoever was down there wasn't trying to hide. They knew we could hear them. Chris was trembling beside me, whispering that we had to do something. I shook my head, signaling for silence. The footsteps grew slower, heavier, moving toward the stairs. Every creak of the wood echoed like thunder in the dark. My throat was dry, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I mouthed to Chris, "We wait." But deep down, I wasn't sure waiting was a good idea anymore. The moment those footsteps faded below, I grabbed Chris's arm and bolted. We sprinted down the hall, every board creaking like it would give us away. My pulse roared in my ears as we flew down the stairs. The kitchen light glared like salvation ahead. We didn't even look back, just burst through the back door and into the cold night air, lungs burning, hearts pounding. When the police finished searching, one of them told us it was probably just our imagination. I wanted to argue, to tell him about the dragging noise, the breathing, the door slamming, but the words stuck in my throat. Chris's mom wrapped a blanket around me, and I realized my hands were still shaking. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights made our quiet street feel unreal. Even now, I still replay that night in my head, the soft breathing, the dragging sound, the front door closing. Sometimes I wonder if whoever was there knew we were just kids and decided to leave, or if they were waiting for something worse. Every time the floor creaks in my house, I freeze for a second, half expecting to hear those footsteps again. We never found out who it was or how they got in, but that night changed something in both of us. The house didn't feel like home for a long time after. Sometimes when I passed by the guest room, I still glanced at the door, half expecting it to move. Hide and seek was supposed to be a game, but that night it felt like we were the ones being found. After that night, the house never felt the same. Every shadow seemed deeper, every creak louder. Sometimes when I lie awake, I still imagine that sound, the slow drag on the carpet, the faint breath behind the door. Maybe it was a stranger, maybe not. But one thing I learned for sure, the scariest thing isn't the dark, it's realizing something else is there with you. I grew up in one of those quiet neighborhoods where every backyard seemed to melt into the woods. There weren't many streetlights, so at night the darkness felt endless. Back then, it was the perfect place for adventure. My friends and I spent countless nights running barefoot through the grass, shouting, laughing, and playing hide and seek until the whole world outside our little street disappeared into blackness. At that age, we thought we were fearless. The woods were our playground, the maze of shadows and whispers that dared us to go deeper each time. The thrill came from not knowing what might be behind the next tree or how far we'd wandered from home. But there was something else about those nights too, a strange stillness like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the wrong move. That night the air was thick, buzzing with cicadas, and the smell of grass hung heavy after the day's heat. The five of us gathered with flashlights, laughing as we planned where to hide. It was one of those perfect summer nights where the world felt endless and safe, or so we thought. The woods behind our houses stretched into darkness, daring us to step just a little farther than we should. The deeper I went, the cooler the air felt, but the darkness thickened fast. I could barely see Tyler's shadow fade between the trees before it vanished completely. The sound of Jason counting echoed faintly, mixing with the hum of crickets and rustling leaves. I crouched lower, my palms damp with sweat, realizing that even though it was just a game, something about that night felt different. The footsteps grew louder, slow and steady, crunching through the dry leaves. I could see faint movement through the gaps in the branches, a darker shadow gliding between the trees. My pulse thudded in my ears as I waited for Jason to call my name or laugh, but he never did. Whoever it was just stopped a few feet away and stood there completely still. Each second stretched like forever as I listened to those fading steps. The sound drifted farther until it melted into the wind, leaving only the buzz of crickets in my pounding heart. I finally dared to lift my head, scanning the dark between the trees. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever, or whatever that was, hadn't truly left, just melted deeper into the shadows. Relieved, I stood up and brushed the dirt from my jeans, but my nerves hadn't settled. The woods felt heavier now, the air thick and unmoving. As I made my way toward the faint glow of the houses, every snap of a twig made me flinch. When Jason's voice echoed again, I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder one last time, swearing I saw something shift behind the fallen log. He frowned and said, "I never went that far into the woods." The laughter faded instantly. Tyler glanced at me, then at Matt, who had stopped smiling. For a moment, no one spoke. The night suddenly felt colder, the crickets quieter. Jason swore he'd stayed near the fence the entire time. I forced a laugh, pretending it didn't matter, but deep down I knew someone else had been out there with us. I pressed my hand against the rough bark of a tree and started counting, my voice echoing through the night. The others scattered, their footsteps fading fast. When I reached 50, I opened my eyes to darkness thicker than before. The woods seemed to swallow even the moonlight. I called out, ready or not, trying to sound confident, though a strange unease crept up my spine. The deeper I went, the more distant the sounds of the neighborhood became. Just the hum of insects and the crunch of leaves beneath my shoes. My flashlight flickered once and my pulse spiked. "Jason, Matt," I called softly, but there was no reply. I caught a faint rustle ahead, branches shifting, and started moving toward it, every step slower than the last. The beam of light cut through the branches, but nothing moved. The sound stopped the moment I aimed toward it. My throat felt dry as I whispered, "Jason, quit messing around." No answer. Only the wind sighing through the leaves. Then, faintly, a twig snapped closer this time. I took a hesitant step forward, the air thick and still, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but my curiosity pushed me on. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I turned back toward the trees. Whoever had been walking out there wasn't Jason. The realization made my chest tighten. I scanned the darkness, half expecting to see a figure between the trunks, but there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just that heavy silence pressing down on me. I jogged back toward the yard, pretending everything was fine, though every step felt slower than the last. Each round felt longer, the darkness pressing closer around us. The others laughed and yelled, but I couldn't join in. My ears were tuned to every rustle, every whisper of movement beyond the trees. Once I thought I saw a shape duck behind a trunk when my flashlight passed over it. My pulse pounded so hard I thought they might hear it. Whatever was out there, it was watching, waiting, and it wasn't playing our game. I hesitated before stepping into the trees again. The woods felt different now, quieter, heavier, as if holding its breath. I could still hear the others talking faintly behind me, but their voices faded fast. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, catching the glint of dew on the leaves. Every instinct told me to stay near the yard, yet I kept walking, drawn deeper by that uneasy mix of fear and curiosity. It wasn't footsteps this time, it was whispering. Faint, broken words carried by the wind, too close to be my friends. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to listen. The voice sounded low, almost like someone talking to themselves. I wanted to call out, but fear glued me to the spot. The whispers stopped, suddenly replaced by the slow crunch of leaves moving closer. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. Every sound in the woods felt amplified, the rustle of leaves, the buzz of insects, even my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Whoever it was had gone deeper, but I couldn't shake the feeling they knew I was there. I waited until Jason finally called the round over before daring to crawl out from my spot. As we sat under the dim porch light, I kept glancing toward the dark tree line. The others joked and teased me, but I couldn't shake the image of that unseen person whispering in the woods. The night air felt colder, now heavier. Just when I started to relax, Matt suddenly asked if anyone else had seen the man. The laughter stopped instantly. Every one of us turned to look at him. Matt swore he wasn't making it up. He described the figure in detail, a tall shadow, motionless, with shoulders too broad to be one of us. He said it was standing between two trees, half hidden by the dark, just staring. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Jason tried to joke again, but nobody laughed this time. The woods behind us suddenly felt closer, like they were listening. That night never really left me. Sometimes I still dream of the wood's dim moonlight, shifting shadows, and that faint whisper just behind me. It always ends the same way. I turn around, but no one's there. Maybe it was all in my head, but deep down I know better. Something or someone was out there with us that night watching. Sometimes when I walk past those woods, I still feel eyes on me, quiet, patient, waiting. Maybe Matt was right. Maybe that man was real. The whisper, the footsteps, they weren't just tricks of the night. I'll never know for sure, and maybe I don't want to. But one thing's certain, when you play in the dark, you stop being the only one doing the hiding. I was 14, living in the quiet countryside of Pennsylvania, the kind of place where time felt slower and nights stretched forever. My backyard was more like a field wide and endless, with a rusted old shed at the far edge. Every summer it became our world. That afternoon the air was hot, the sky clear, and my friends Ryan, Josh, and Adam were over laughing as we shot hoops near the garage. We'd been sitting there catching our breath when we noticed him, a stranger, walking up from the dirt road like he'd been watching us for a while. He wasn't from around here. We all knew everyone in the neighborhood. He looked older, maybe 16, with messy black hair that hung in his eyes and a calm expression that somehow felt. The strangest thing was his clothes, long jeans and a gray shirt, despite the heavy July heat pressing down on everything. Our laughter died the second he got close. He didn't hesitate, just walked right up to us like we were old friends. You guys need one more?" he asked casually, like he belonged there. None of us said anything at first, we just stared. Finally, Adam broke the silence, asking who he was. The kid smiled slightly and said his name was Keith. He claimed he lived up the road and had spotted us while walking through the woods. We exchanged uneasy glances. I'd lived there my entire life and never once seen this kid, yet he spoke like he knew the place better than us. His tone was calm, confident, even when he said my yard was perfect for hiding. That part stuck with me. Still, we were bored and restless, so after a moment of silence we all shrugged and agreed to play manhunt. Looking back, that should have been the moment we questioned him. How could a total stranger know my yard had so many hiding spots? But at the time we just laughed it off. The sun was blazing, and running around sounded way better than standing in the heat. We split into two teams, and before anyone could even suggest otherwise, Keith quickly volunteered to be the first hunter. Keith grinned when he said he loved being the seeker, and something about the way he said it made me uneasy. Once Adam kicked the soccer ball, we scattered. Ryan disappeared toward the tree line, Ben darted behind the garage, and I sprinted for the old storage shed. The smell of gasoline and wood hit me the moment I stepped inside. It was dark, cramped, and quiet, exactly the kind of place no one would think to check right away. My heart nearly stopped as the tarp was yanked away. For a split second, I thought it was Keith, that strange grin flashing in my mind, but when I looked up, it was only Adam laughing. I forced a shaky laugh, too, trying to calm down. "Found you," he said, smugly tapping my shoulder. I crawled out from the pile, my shirt covered in dust, telling myself to shake off that weird rush of panic. We all glanced toward the yard and the edge of the woods, half expecting him to pop out laughing, but the trees were still, and the road beyond was empty. "Maybe he went home," Adam said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Ryan shook his head. He wouldn't just leave without saying anything. The air felt heavier than the kind of silence that makes you realize something isn't right. The house felt unusually quiet after the noise of the day. I grabbed a soda and glanced out the kitchen window, half expecting to see Keith walking up the dirt road. Instead, something else caught my eye, a faint movement near the tree line, like someone slipping between the shadows. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was nothing, and turned away. Still, something about that rope bothered me. It wasn't just random junk. One end was frayed like it had been cut, and the other was tied into a tight loop. I remember standing there, staring at it longer than I should have. The evening breeze rustled through the trees, but all I could think about was Keith's blank expression and the way he'd watched us play. It was faint at first, a slow, deliberate creak like weight shifting on old wood. I froze, listening. The sound came again, closer this time from the hallway right outside my door. My heart began pounding so loud I could barely hear. I muted my phone's screen and stared at the doorknob, half expecting it to start turning on its own. Seconds dragged by like minutes. Then from the other side of the door came a faint exhale, not a sigh, but a slow, steady breath, as if someone was standing inches away, listening. I backed up until my legs hit the bed. The silence that followed was even worse. Just when I thought it was over, I heard the front door creak open somewhere downstairs. Every corner felt darker than usual as we moved from room to room. My dad led the way, barrel raised the wooden floor, creaking under his boots. We checked the living room, the kitchen, even the attic entrance, nothing. When he opened the back door, the night air hit us cold and still. The yard was empty, yet the grass near my window looked freshly trampled. I tried to laugh with them, but deep down I didn't buy it. Something about Keith felt off, the way he'd appeared out of nowhere, how he vanished without a word. That night, when the sun went down, I caught myself checking every window lock twice. My dad told me to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Keith wasn't finished with us. My breath caught in my throat as the sound grew louder, more deliberate. Then it stopped, just silence and my pounding heartbeat. I forced myself to lift one corner of the blinds just enough to peek outside. In the faint moonlight, a silhouette stood inches from the window. I couldn't see a face, only the outline of a person motionless in the dark. My dad stormed toward the front door, shotgun in hand, shouting for whoever it was to get off our property. The air outside split with the sound of 2 gunshots fired into the sky. I stood trembling in the hallway, listening to his voice echo across the yard. When he came back in, his face was pale. Whoever it was, he said, "They're gone now." I wanted to believe him, but a part of me knew it wasn't just some harmless prank. Keith had vanished too easily, like he was never meant to be found. My dad swore he'd keep the shotgun loaded from now on and told me to never talk to strangers near the property again. Still, every time the wind brushed against the windows, I imagined that same figure standing out there waiting. Keith never returned, at least not that I ever saw. But every time I step outside after dark, I can't shake the thought that maybe he's still out there somewhere beyond the tree line watching. Sometimes I dream about waking up just a little later that night, hearing the window creak open and realizing I was no longer alone. That rope wasn't just lying there for nothing. Thank you for staying until the end. If the dark didn't scare you away, maybe you belong here. Subscribe to Night Whispers and let the darkness find you again next time.